just a couple of words before we get going. Remember, many people out there judge philosophy to be another kind of religion. I remember a young woman in Ottawa said to me, "What do you do again?" We're going down an elevator in the apartment building we both lived in. And I said, "A professor of philosophy." And she said, "Oh, that's right, philosophy." I remember her exact words. "C'est la même chose que la religion, n'est-ce pas?" It's the same thing as religion. Well, I say again, if you put religion on that, first of all, religion's a practice. She shouldn't have said religion, she should have said theology. Theology on that wall, that's one science, and the 5 sciences of philosophy on that wall, all other human knowledges lie between. Never forget that. We might deal with the same topics as the theologian. We're dealing with them from a worm's viewpoint. The theologian will deal with them from a bird's viewpoint, or from God's viewpoint. But that doesn't make it the same thing. They're merely materially the same. If we boil a man down and find that he's about 95% of water, and then certain other things like certain chemicals, molybdenum and chromium and zinc and all the rest, that doesn't make the biologist and the psychologist the same subject, because they deal with that same being. That's rather childlike, and it could only be said in this contemporary era. In the past, medieval period, etc., they wouldn't have said anything silly like that. So, we prove the existence in all living things of an animating principle, one which causes the operations to be imminent actions, whereas non-living things, the operations are transitive actions. You'll remember that. This is right at the beginning of our course. Man can do transitive actions too, and so can a kangaroo, and so can a plant even. When it grows and pushes its way, like the rock I told you about. It was about that high, a big sandstone rock. Split it right down. Made a big V in the rock. So the plant can do transitive actions, actions which affect another. But man can do not only transitive actions, but even higher imminent actions than a kangaroo or a dog or an alligator can do. Now, what we're coming tonight to deal with is what we started with last class. What is that animating principle? First of all, what distinguishes man from other things is the intellect. We saw that. No other things have intellect like man has. Even those above man. Angels, God, they don't have intellect like man does. Man has a reasoning intellect. There's an intuitive intellect. For instance, if you said to Michael the archangel, triangle. Now he knows the whole of Euclidean geometry about triangle, because his intellect is powerful and intuitive. Now we can't prove as philosophers the existence of angelic beings. We can't prove that. But we can see that they ought to exist. Remember what I said before? How we have minerals. Next higher things are plants. Next are brutes. Then there's man. Right, we know with certitude the existence of those things. We can also prove with utter certitude the existence of God. And since we know why he created the universe, to share his own good that he possesses, all the good, with other things. Remember what the ancient Neoplatonic philosophers in the 3rd to the 5th century said? Good is diffusive of itself. I've seen that in the classroom many times. Girls come in, look what I got over the weekend, engagement ring. Or I told you when I won the 10,000 in the lottery, those around me were, gee, what are you going to do with it, etc. Oh boy, aren't you lucky, let me touch you. I was the only person that wasn't ultra excited. I don't know why, but I wasn't. But Good is diffusive of itself. You've got something good to share, you want to share it. So if that is so, the radiation from God of all that he does, there's too big a gap between him and man. An enormous gap. In fact, an infinite gap. So angelic beings, or spiritual substances as the ancients more accurately called them. Angel is a Christian word. It's spelled in Greek. Double G in Greek is pronounced N. You've got that even amongst the Melanesian natives out in the west of the Pacific now. That's pronounced Nandi. And this is pronounced Pango Pango. Nasalized D's and G's. Well, angelos means a messenger from God to man. That's a Christian word. That's not what a philosopher should use. We should call them spiritual substances. Because any substance which is non-material is necessarily rational, intellective, etc. So, my friends, we saw evidence for the immateriality of the human intellect. If you try to deny the existence of intellect amongst ancient philosophers, they'd say it straight back. You're using your intellect to deny the existence of intellect. And 4 centuries BC, in Aristotle's work, De Anima, concerning the soul. Remember, that word anima means soul. So animal means a souly thing. Psyche in Greek, that's in Latin, I'm sorry, anima. Psyche in Greek means soul. So psychology is a souly subject. I told you this story, I think, about a friend of mine, professor. A student said, I don't like that word, that's a religious word. You shouldn't be using that in this classroom. And Dr. Russell said, what does animal mean? What does psychology mean? Don't you dare use those words in my classroom, he said to the young man. You know what's so funny I found amongst students is usually the girls that come after and say, he's a nut, or something like that. You rarely got the boys come and say something like that. But the girls would. They're more open, and I found very good in that respect. They were not afraid to express their opinions, etc. So, my friends, we saw this. We saw 4 out of about 6 different ways. Aristotle remarked how the sensitive order, when we have sense interferences, like for instance, when I was coming through the Suez Canal, I remember looking out over the desert. We wrinkled up our eyes, we're like this. Why? Because the organ is tampered with by the extreme light. Then you turn around and try to look at somebody and you can't see them. Or I stood, I think there were 8 16-pound cannon going off on one occasion. Now, they weren't aiming at me. And as I heard this, I turned to a friend of mine, and I could see his mouth going, but I couldn't hear a word he was saying. Why? Because the organ is affected. But when we have an extremely clear and profound thought, those things happen to people at times. We can all get flashes like that. The intellect doesn't freeze up when you deal with other concepts. On the contrary, that supreme or very high, clear thought can make them more intelligible, the other concepts. So you don't lose, you actually gain in the intellectual order. Aristotle remarked on that. As I said, 4th centuries BC. I've given you the reference in the notes. Which, by the way, we shouldn't call notes, we should call it the text. It's more of a text. So we saw that there are 4 signs of the presence of intellect. Amongst brute animals, why we can say there's no intellect, there's absence of evidence of intellect. There's a lack of evidence, for example, that there's speech. There's no speech. Everything they do is done from instinct. They do some magnificent stuff at times. And the 4 signs of intellect are absent in brute animals. Lack of speech, lack of progress. What they do is they do perfectly every time. Remember the hairy Ammophila? Remember the bees with hexagonal cells? It took thousands of years for engineers to discover how to make hexagonal cells, or to discover rather that hexagonal cells are the strongest way of building a structure. Then lack of progress. What they do perfectly the first time. Lack of understanding of a means as a means to an end. They don't know a telegraph pole as a telegraph pole, they just make it as an object of their activities. Lack of understanding of immaterial objects. I remember Monique Laurendeau, professor of psychology of intelligence, dealing with the experiments with apes and children. Vastly different when a key was hidden. They were shown how to open a door, then the key was hidden. So plants and brutes do not have knowledge. They do not have intellect, I'm sorry. Then we saw the spirituality of the human intellect. We saw its utter immateriality. There's a certain elevation above the matter that the power of sight has, the power of hearing. All the organic powers have a certain elevation, a certain perfection of the form over the matter. But the intellect is utterly immaterial. That's the concept of the spiritual, what is utterly immaterial. We saw the first argument from the immateriality of the object. The intellect can think about things which are utterly devoid of individuating matter. For instance, I can talk to them about relationship, relativity. I can talk to them about man, about goodness, about truth, about reliability. We can talk to man with all these things, but not to dogs. The immateriality of the object shows the immateriality of the intellect. Because do follows be. What something does do is manifestative of its way it bees. Do follows be, and the mode of doing follows the mode of being. Remember that. Also, whatever is received in the manner of the recipient. So, since immaterial things are received in the intellect itself is immaterial. The second argument, from reflection of the intellect over its own act. The sight cannot see its own act because the organ has to go between it and the object of sight. So the eye can't place itself between itself and the power of sight. It can't bend back over itself. But the intellect can. The intellect can say, I understand that 2 and 2 equal 4. And in fact, I can understand that I understand that 2 and 2 equal 4. In fact, I assent to this, that 2 and 2 equal 4. In fact, I approve of this, that 2 and 2 equal 4. The intellect can bend back over itself, but the other powers cannot. Not even the higher the higher senses, like the internal senses. They can't even reflect. In fact, to know if one of them had to have an act, or we want to know their action, we have to have a special sense of that called sense consciousness, you remember. So, but the intellect can reflect over its own act. Then there is the big proof. Notice that's what consciousness means. Consciousness comes from 2 words. Con, which is a form of cum. That's a word you can almost write a book about. Cum in Latin, with. It's gone through so many changes and used in so many different ways. So con plus scio. I know at the same time. I know together. With knowledge. I do the act to, at least I know that I know that things are around me, I'm conscious of what's around me, but at the same time I know that I'm conscious. I know my knowing, in other words. It's the proper meaning of consciousness. It's amazing how many books you will see in which this is not defined, or it's defined vaguely. So that's what consciousness is, when we're aware of our knowledges. Now the third argument, which is the big one, the one that the professional philosophers, even Anaxagoras, way back 400 years, well before Aristotle, etc., and Aristotle seized on that and saw the repercussions of it. What appears inwardly hinders and obstructs what comes into it, or hinders and obstructs the extraneous, is the way he put it. In other words, if the sight had blueness in its nature, everything it sees would be in terms of blueness. It would cancel out probably red. And everything that we hear is like, remember the way I started it off. Water, according to itself, they're the key words, is neither hot nor cold. If it had cold in its nature, then whatever you found water, you'd find cold water. I was in Rotorua in the North Island of New Zealand on one occasion, and the Maori woman who was our guide said to me, "Put your hand in the water there." Water coming down from the mountains was freezing. Now put your hand in the sand next to it. That far apart. This was where really hot. And just over there were boiling mud springs, blub, 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 and like eggs being fried, or perhaps being boiled. What do we call them again? What kind of eggs? They're poached eggs. That's right. Thank you. That's my conscience over there. And, so that's just what it looked like. And I was amazed. I was looking at the water, I was looking at the sand, and looking at that. Because I tend to open my big mouth a bit much too. Rangi, who was the princess of the Maoris, I said to her, "Would you show us the Maori farewell?" And she said, "Yes, come here." And there I am rubbing noses with them. And it was filmed and shown all over the darn world, rubbing noses with Rangi, because Fox Movie Tone had cameras there that day. And so, and then she said, somebody there said, I think it was the bus driver or something, he said, his wife didn't get a picture, do it again. So, but that's the way they greet each other, rub noses, and quite a pleasant practice, especially if the other one is a cute little French blonde. So I
think the radiation worked.
You think it worked, did you? It wasn't too good today, believe me. So the other thing is sight. It doesn't, according to itself, have red or blue in its nature. Likewise, the intellect doesn't have tree, rocks in its nature, doesn't have any bodily thing. How do we know? Because it can know all bodies. Remember, when it knows a body, the form of that body is giving the intellect its form. It can't act till it gets form. Pure potency, as the intellect is, pure potency for all bodies, can do nothing till it's got the form of a body. So it therefore is devoid of any body. You can see Aristotle struggled to express this. He had nobody before him to explain that. Those men were brilliant, but struggling. How he came to all of this, it was because of Anaxagoras saying what appears inwardly hinders and obstructs the extraneous. What can be all does, according to itself, be none. That's another way of putting it. So therefore, the intellect is utterly without matter. In other words, that's the notion of the utterly immaterial and the spiritual, in other words. And why it's called spiritual, spirein in Greek, means to breathe. And the Greeks didn't have a word for spiritual. That's what confused the Arabs. When Aristotle wrote that it was separable from matter, he meant it had no matter in it. It was something apart from matter. So they used the word word to breathe, spirein. That's where the word spiritual comes. It's a breathy thing. A spiritual thing is a breathy thing. something you can't get hold of. You find all of that on page 67. By the way, you caught up with page 68 that I doubled up on, unfortunately. I've now corrected that. I skipped a number so it would be correctable. Instead of sending them all out, putting all the pages out, I corrected by skipping one number. But I've corrected that. If anybody would like the pages corrected, I'll send it to you. So, there are the arguments for the spirituality of the intellect. Now I've taken and added a little bit to page 68, which I think I sent out to you all. You'll notice there's a bit of a difference. I added something. The importance of this spirituality of the intellect. Man is a person because he has an intellectual soul. The intellect, of course, is a faculty of operation of the human soul. The same as generation is a faculty of a plant soul. Three powers or three faculties of operation or operative powers a plant has: nutrition, growth, and reproduction or generation. So the importance of this spirituality of the intellect that we show in ethics. Man is a person. He's not just an individual. There was a play put on by a Catholic organisation in Australia that I attended once, by an organisation that specialised in plays, and they used to sort of try and carry a social message with it. And what they proved is you've got to take into account that man is an individual. My old master was present. He nearly had a fit when he heard this. Man is not just an individual, he's a person. He's an individual, but he's more than an individual. He's a person. A dog's an individual. A tree is an individual. That means the undivided member of the species. If you divide the dog, it's no longer a dog. Divide a plant, it's no longer a plant. It doesn't belong to that species. It may die. It may, for other reasons, by vegetative reproduction, grow another branch or something. But man is above that, and the strict definition of man is rational supposite, not, as somebody recently wrote, a being of free will. I saw that on my computer. I don't know who sent it to me. But we can define him as that, but it's an accidental thing. Man is a laughing animal. You can call him that. But that's not his essential definition. Man is a rational animal. That's the essential definition. And all those other things, free will, etc., all are as a result of his rationality. They're all what we call metaphysical properties. And a metaphysical property means the same as rationality, but looked at from a different viewpoint. That's what a metaphysical property is. So man, as a free animal, having free will, that's the same as saying rationality, but looking at him from a different viewpoint. Now, the importance of this spirituality, man is a person. And as we'll see, when it comes to ethics, man as a person is superior to man as an individual. But let me put that on the board for a minute. I think you might find this a little bit interesting. Man as spiritual equals person. Man as material is an individual. As a person, society exists for him. As an individual, he exists for society. Dogs are individual and they only exist for the species. So to young calves, if it is not good for the species, I remember being with a champion calf one day, a little bull calf. It was magnificent. Dr. Woodbury was absolutely thrilled of its memory. It was a great breeder of cattle. He'd come from a farm and he had used his great, profound intellect to breed cattle, direct the breeding of cattle. And he said, turned to Joe, he said, this beautiful calf lying on the ground, put a bullet in it, Joe, because it was injured. It received a crushing in its skull by an angry Irish gardener. It got into his garden a little bit somewhere and he hit it with a spade and creased its skull. I think Woodbury would have creased his skull if he could have got hold of him and got away with it. But we can do that. Now we'll send that bull to the calf, to the, on an orphanage in around Sydney, there was a bull that learned that he could leap a 6-foot fence. He warned me on one occasion when a bull got mad at me. He said, be careful, he'll get over that fence. I said, it's too high for him. He said, oh no, when they know they can do it, they will do it. But we'll send them to the butcher. This particular one was sent to the butcher because they couldn't control it. It learned to jump the fences, 6-foot fences. Anyway, we can do that. And plants will say, well, that bush is no good, chop it down. But man's a person. Man has something that the bull hasn't got. Man's got rights. And it's precisely because of the spiritual intellect. As a person, we have rights. Why? First, we have obligations. As a consequence, we have rights. Go on. Don't be afraid. For instance, Joe has an obligation to educate his children. Now he has a right to send them to a school of his choice. Not of the government's choice, but his choice. I looked today, as I was brought from Buffalo to from the Roswell Park, and I came, as I was coming, I was looking at institutions, academic institutions, and I saw different ones there, and I thought, this is a beautiful building. What a magnificent buildings these are. And it's built by government money. The government's job is not the education of children. That's not the government's job. Its job is to deal with the common good, not private goods. Education is a private good. The government has no right, not even any right, except in an emergency. Well, everybody has an obligation to jump in a case of emergency. But with health care, that's not the government's function. That's our own private goods. Look after our own health, look after our own education. But as I have said in a work I published, which I've never seen anybody else say, here I was sticking my neck out, I thought, that educatedness, the result of education, that is the government's interest. But not to fund it, but to preserve it. Because the common goods alone. And remember, there are 3 different goods. First there's the private good. Then there can be, let's say, common good. These 2 goods. Or, I'm going to rewrite that. Put it this way. Private, public good. Then there's the common good, out here. A private good is the good of the individual person. His goods. Your clothing. Your glasses. Your struggle to get education, etc. They're all private goods. But public goods are the goods of the totality of the United States. Common goods are your goods and the goods of the United States. And these are all public goods. You could sometimes the word public good is used of the common good. You even find St. Thomas even writing like that. But the public good is the good of the totality. And sometimes these are used interchangeable. Lots of great authors have done that. But strictly speaking, we'll put it this way. There are private goods and there are public goods. Now, public goods are buildings, cars, courts, libraries, and things that are the government belongs to the government for the government's welfare or the good of the country. But the goods that enable the government to obtain the common good. Now, you've got to be so careful with your words. The government really doesn't obtain the common good. We all obtain the common good together. And the common good is the good of the totality and the good of each person. The totality and the good of the parts. And they're immaterial goods. Public goods are material goods which are used to obtain the common good. Now, defense of the United States is a common good. Public goods are used in order to procure that. And that's the function of a government. But the common goods are immaterial things, perfectly divisible, and the more each takes from it, the more each gains, or the more each contributes, the more each gains. And by me taking a lot of it, I take nothing from you, because they're immaterial. That's published in a work one of the works, I don't know which one it was now, but this was somewhere there, buried in the many pages. So the importance of this spirituality of the intellect is vast. The whole of ethics evolves around it. That we are not just brute animals, we're raised above them. Infinitely above them. I'm using that word very carefully. Infinitely above the sense life of dogs, giraffes, kangaroos, and dangaroos. You know dangaroos, don't you? They've got in the zoo, big notice up, keep back, these animals are dangaroos. So, it's very important to distinguish the person from the individual. The spirituality intellect is the first step to proving this distinction. The whole foundation of political theory exists in this distinction between man as individual and man as person. The contemporary mess in the organization of society is based on the confusion of these two conceptualizations of man in society. Men arguing from various legislatures, arguing about this, arguing about that. And very often, both are wrong. And sometimes both are right. But they're not clear on what they're talking about. That's their problem.
Excuse me, Doctor.
Yeah.
What page are you on, please?
Or page 68.
Old 68 or new 68?
Old 68, yeah. No, the first 68, at the end of that. So now we come to immortality of the human soul. You see, by the way, coming back to that again, even taxation comes into it. How much tax, what's the measure of tax that a government can give us, or charge us rather? What is required to have public goods for the sake of the common good? No more. And the less we've got of the public goods, the better. For instance, if we could fend the United States with 10 warships, that's all we need to have. We don't need to have 15. In other words, don't overburden it. We want as much of the common good as we can get with the least of the public goods that we can use to get them. That's a lot on taxation. One night, very shortly, I'm going to speak about taxation and the common good. I'll take an hour to do that.
You better talk to Obama about that.
Yeah. We'll need quite a few hours for questions and answers.
So, because man is rational, he is a lot of things. He's a talking animal, a laughing animal. We can't say he's a crying animal because other animals cry too. But he's above all a progressive animal. Mortimer Adler, I've mentioned this before, I think, was speaking at University of Ottawa. He was in a panel of 4. I never saw a more stupid panel put together. It was our own dean that did that. And Mortimer Adler said, we can get an animal to do anything that a man can do today. We have no distinguishing characteristic. Dr. Russell made an appropriate remark. Tell him to go and read his own books again. He's written against that, but he spoke out. Mortimer Adler was a good man. I met him 2 or 3 times and, liked the man. But when he said things like that, I couldn't believe it. But, all right, we can teach a dog to do this. But man can progress. That's the point. Man can progress in what he does. Other animals do this and do this and do this. Mrs. Haig with her dog and his slippers, her slippers. When he wants to go out, he's learned to go and get her slippers. And that's good. But does he progress beyond that? Say, I'll get you a new pair, or I'll go and polish them for you? No.
And what sweater do you want today?
So, now, since the intellect is a spiritual power, and remember, do follows be, and the mode of doing follows the mode of being. In other words, we look at the operation of a thing and we see what kind of a being it is. Man's a thinking, a rational animal. So we know we've deduced this, that he's got a spiritual intellect. And now we want to deal with is the soul immortal? I said this to an Australian engineer and his wife when we were chatting. They just arrived in Montreal and we had a spare room and we let them use the spare room. And we got talking one day and I said something about we can prove the immortality of the human soul. There's life in the world. This is typical of an Australian engineer and typical of an Australian university. Don't be shocked, miss, I'm Australian. I've had people say, what are you criticising Australians for? You've got no right to do that. Criticise who I damn well like. I remember a young woman coming up to Woodbury and saying, and here's a great genius, recognised, watched in Europe, etc., and America, and a girl came and said, who are you to criticise a man like Kant? He said, I'll criticise Kant. I'll criticise anybody I like, including you. He says, she wilted. She was about this high and he was about this high. She wilted. If you go wrong, I'll criticise what you say too. He wasn't rude to her. And anyway, now I've forgotten what the heck I was talking about.
Is the soul
Do
immortal?
follows be.
Oh yes, Ian said, you're the first in the history of the world to claim that. I said, you're about 2,500 years too late. I said, philosophers all through history have taught that we survive after death. The great Arabs, the great Jews, the great Romans, they all taught that. Some of them, like Seneca, would reflect on that, what does it mean, etc. But Aristotle knew it. Plato knew it. Plato expressed it badly. Aristotle was much more accurate. He corrected his own master in that way. So the human soul is the form of the human body. By form, remember, the inside fixer that fixes within a thing what it does be. I've got a spare piece of paper. I don't know whether I've got some here.
Is it picture like this?
Yes, please. Thank you. This has got, remember there are 10 forms, 10 modes of forms. There's substance, makes things be a substance. There are those which make them be shapes, sizes, and those which make them be coloured, and those which make them move, and those make, etc., etc. 10 kinds of forms, 10 fixing principles, if you like. Whiteness, let's take that. Whiteness is one thing. But if you multiply the substance it's in by dividing it, the whiteness is also divided. So the form of whiteness is divided. In itself, whiteness cannot exist apart from substance. 9 accidents cannot exist apart from substances. I multiply the whiteness again. You can have it back, Bob, if you want.
Put it back together.
Anyway, so that's the way it goes. We've got so the human soul, as we proved much earlier at the beginning of the psychological part of our course, we proved the human soul is the animating principle, or if you like, the principle that makes living things be living. And matter multiplies. Now there are a myriad of forms. There are only 10 modes of forms, but in each one of us, there's different shape, different size, different action, different sufferings, etc. All, we might be, the shape. We have the shape of the ears, the shape, like an uncle of mine had taxi door ears. Then there are different shapes of, and different colours. The feet may be a different colour from the head, or something like that. All sorts of things. So we are a myriad of forms all put together. I used to try and think when I first started to learn this, we've only got 10 things to modify us, but no, it's much more, much greater than that. But the substantial form is what makes us be the substance of what we are. We know that that's continuous in each one of us. You tread on my toe, I'll feel it all through my body. And if you have a shower, you feel the goodness of the shower all through your body. So we have, the substance is in the whole body. So where's the intellect? In the whole body. The soul is a rational soul. And the intellect is one of its powers, as we saw earlier. Like the 3 powers of vegetative life: nutrition, growth, generation. Or the powers of doggy life, in other words, animal life, brute life. You've got the 5 external senses in the higher animals, the vertebrates, and then you've got the 4 internal senses. And that's it's the soul. It's not located in a particular part of the body because the soul covers the whole body. And it's true, you remember me saying that the body's in the soul rather than the soul's in the body. You can't have the greater in the lesser. The animating principle goes right with our toes. So in a way we think with our toes just as much as with our heads. But we are conscious of our heads operating. Why? Because that's where the internal senses are. And what makes one person brighter than another is the organisation of those internal senses, the disposing of them for good rational life. In some, it's well disposed for mathematics, and others it's well disposed for something else. So, obviously, man is not immortal. He's immortal through his soul. We know through the Christian revelation that the matter, which we call the body, will be restored to that. We can't prove it as philosophers. We just borrow that from the Christian theologian. Be careful using the word religion, by the way. Religion is a practice. It's not a science. Look, what does the word mean? God made man. We have re plus lig, a bond back. So religion is a bond back. I get tired of hearing people say, oh, philosophy is the same as religion. Haven't had it said for a while. I think those I said it to were stung by the reply I gave them. One occasion I had to be forced to say, would you really know? So, the idea of immortality has been in the human mind from the earliest times. The Australian Aborigines, the New Guineans, I meant to bring a book in. I'd like to show you a picture of children sitting around grandfather. He's been dead 6 months, but they're sitting around him. His body was in a cave, and of course in those climates, in a cave like that, the body dries out very quickly. And they're sitting around him, and they've got food with them. Colin Simpson brings that out very well in his excellent book. So, since the soul, through its operative power called the intellect, proves itself to be spiritual, immaterial, therefore it cannot disintegrate. It's spiritual, which means it's simple. It isn't united with the body. The body will corrupt when the soul leaves the body. It'll corrupt the same as a flower will. And a tree. And by the way, Dr. Woodbury told me, I met his father. You see his brother was a genius, a mathematical genius. He'd multiply a row of figures like that with another row of figures later to give the answer. And he thought that's the way everybody thought. He didn't realise he was a genius. He was a farmer. And when I met his father, those piercing blue eyes, I can still see them as he sat on a veranda outdoors. And but when he died, the head was the last thing to die. All the rest of him had died a bit. The same as a branch can die on a tree. And old Mr. Woodbury was sort of, they said, oh, his legs are gone. The rest of the body's died. It's only a matter of hours now, the head will die. If not to die, at least tomorrow. So, the immortality of the human soul is proved when we've proved the spirituality of the intellect. And this is believed all over the world. And a common effect requires a common cause. And it's implanted in the nature of man to know that. And the only people who will deny it will be those who have been de-educated in our universities. They're the only people who will deny it. As Woodbury used to call them, de-educated monsters came out of Australian University of Sydney. A great university, but devoid of any real universal conceptualization of man and the universe. See, university comes from unum, one, versus one towards many. It's a principle of unification. Many universities have no idea what a university is today. It's being argued a lot. They should go and read Henry Newman, The Idea of a University. That's what they should be reading. So the idea of immortality has been in the human mind from the earliest of times, just as the existence of God has. I was in Switzerland in 1962, wasn't it? Yes, 1962. Car broke down. Blizzard. I was stranded. I went to a nearby monastery and said, have you got any mechanics in here by any chance? No, we don't have mechanics here, but you'll have to wait till one comes from a town or something. We'll put you up for the night if you like. So they took me to the dining room and there was fish and chips on the menu. Beautiful. Best I've ever eaten. I said to the abbot, I had to go and say thank you to the cook. He said, that's not necessary. I said, I want to. So I went into the kitchen and I said to one of the monks in there, I said, are you the fish fryer? He said, no, I'm the chipmunk. Please take a break.
Always tell me it's break time.